My name's Glyn Pooley and I'd like to talk about art. This time my subject is...
Tonight we're going to have a look at the work of Charles Byrd. Some of you would have heard of Charles's work because he was Cardiff based for many years. But yes, this is kind of the first kind of presentation in this format we can think of him, because he is kind of still lesser known. But you'll see by the end of this presentation, his range of work was quite extraordinary on so many levels. So he could offer us lots of inspiration for our work. Extraordinary, as you can see, this is a picture of Charles when he was 100. And he did carry on till he was 102. And on, right up to the day that he passed on, he was painting and creating, and he still had paint on his hands, as you can see that is there. So this is one of his later abstract sculptures, which he'd taken an influence from early 20th century art in the creation of it, but he's obviously given it his own twist. But he sat there in his little bed sit in Romney Road in Canton, and I was privileged enough to meet him on a number of occasions and even make an artwork together with him. And it was absolutely fascinating, because he was born in 1916, which is, incredible period in art, if you like, from 1916 all the way up to 2018. So he lived through many kinds of 20th century isms, if we like, but also followed his own path and his own vision right the way through. So what you can see here is a very early picture. Little background about his early life. He was born in Pontypridd. He was the second of seven children, so larger families obviously were the order of the day at those times, and that had an influence in the path that he took. When he was 10, his family moved to Barry, and he went to Romney schools in Barry, which at the time had a fantastic headmaster and a fantastic leader of the music and art department. It was actually the father of Grace Williams, the composer. So really encouraged Charles and all the students there to have a fully rounded education. And I remember Charles pointing this out to me. He said, we got to learn, it was a grammar, it was a high standard of school. He said, we got to learn about maths and English, and they got taken even on trips for Shakespeare up to Stratford. But he said we also learned practical things, metalwork, woodwork, as well as cultural elements. So he played in the school orchestra, and there was a school choir that was known right throughout the UK. And they would go on tours, and Charles would be part of this. So he had a really expanded education early on. Quite incredible to think of that, in these times, in terms of resources they mustered up in the community and where they took these students. And you think that was just in at the period where there was a kind of Great Depression as well, and Charles kind of remembered that aspect. But education was everything, and education really transformed his outlook on the world, and it enabled him to keep that big vision as he developed his art. So this was kind of an early attempt, because when he was, I think it was 13 or 14, his dad came into the school and took him out of the grammar school. He got into grammar school, so obviously a bright guy, and took him out because he needed to earn money for the family. So, he ended up doing a whole series of jobs, but he did actually do some work for a photographer, which is more in line with his evolved passion. But he worked for the Royal National Institute for the Blind, fixing glasses and things like that. And then he had to go and serve in the Second World War, but he used all his mechanical skills in that. So he was working on the bombers, and he was working on Hurricane aircraft. Now I mention this because this becomes a large part of his artwork as it kind of develops later on. you start to see all these different themes and fragments coming together. So in this early picture, which he gave to his aunt, actually, initially, and she wasn't that impressed with it. She said, I don't want that on my wall. This is what he said to me. I don't want that. Give me something else, which he kindly did. He was a very humble man. But we see in this picture, an understanding for composition, the way everything, draws attention to the center, the way everything is supported, going round and round, like I often talk about, so that we don't escape the picture. He also includes some little figures for scale in the piece, and he sets, an interesting atmosphere by the muted colors that he uses. And it's that interesting atmosphere which kind of evolves in his work. So this is another early picture, as you can see, of Bute Street. These are amazing in terms of these bygone times. Bute Street was vibrant at that time, and it was international. It became known as Tiger Bay because of all the nationalities that kind of coalesced there. And you can see in this picture, he's managed to give this kind of feel of, the music and the jazz and slight sophistication from different cultures. But also there's a kind of other narrative which is being presented there. This could be Charles or the artist walking up these steps to this fascinating place with a slightly bemused onlooker there, with a hint of a few other people just looking out through the windows there and there, as if something else is just about to happen. And it's got this kind of flattened perspective in it. These oil paintings, quite dark and richly painted, with a lot of varnish and gloss in the medium, so they do kind of shine out like little jewels. But at this time, they're flat areas of colour, which kind of evolves further when he developed. Because Charles, as I said, he decided to be an artist, a full-time artist, when he was 32. He enrolled at night classes at Cardiff, and one of his teachers actually was a chap called Leslie Moore, which was the man that set up the summer school in Barry, if I remember correctly. Now, so many people said he was an inspiration in terms of empowering people to develop their creativity, but he exposed him to, the art world and the different artists that were kind of developing all kinds of ideas. So it was big thinking that was being presented. And Charles was in a position, as a relatively young artist who stayed in Cardiff, where he didn't have a lot of resources, financial resources. So his subject matter became the elements which were really close to him. So he lived in the Canton area, and he makes some fabulous pictures of Canton, centre of Cardiff, and then down in kind of Cardiff Bay early on. But you see this amazing sophistication in these pictures. This is a winter scene, but it's so much more than just a view out through the window. It captures this amazing atmosphere, this amazing light in the picture, but he kind of uplifts the whole picture with these beautiful colours, these jewel-like colours, and brings together these really interesting simultaneous narratives. You've got people going about their business there. Of course, lady here putting up, the washing, putting out the washing. Some chap fixing the gutter in there. Someone else, chopping down a tree. Child playing. All together in the same kind of picture. A couple chatting. He kind of makes time expand and tells many stories simultaneously, but also brings up a kind of a feeling of mystery in the piece. This is winter. It's really dark, but they put out clothes, colourful clothes to dry. What's the chances of them drying in the winter? I don't know. There's this kind of subtext, sub-story being offered there, so we can ask these questions. Painted in these times, which are still quite dark as well, after the Second World War, ideas start to come to your mind about what was going on under the surface. But these little stories which are playing out in this scene, in this local scene, beautifully painted and the composition and the structure is amazing. You can see that he's embraced elements of post-impressionism, elements of maybe parts of Gorgan, and the pointillists start to evolve here, but also abstraction is there, flat areas of color, all brought together, where we just can keep investigating this scene over and over and over. And I remember when I first was introduced to him, I think it was in the 80s, the 1980s, something like that. They had some of his pictures up in Cardiff Old Library, which was on the Hayes. And they were just staggering, to see them up there and be able to investigate them. That's an interesting story, which we'll talk about a bit later. This one, a kitchen in Canton, I just love it. In terms of art history references, it takes me straight to someone like Van Gogh. You think of Van Gogh's Yellow Room, you think of his chair, you think of the bed and those kinds of things there. You think of the straightforward honesty in Van Gogh is being presented in a picture like this. There's the yellow is, really emotive as well. So it there's so many symbols which come from that color yellow being used like that. Obviously the sun and the golden and the light coming through it. So there's a simple joy there. And there's an optimism because the room is looking out onto a garden. Trees are full where someone might be trying to get apples from the trees or whatever, or even playing. They're there. So there's an optimism, but there's a sophistication in the kind of way the artwork's being treated. We're seeing elements of cubism being incorporated in this because we're seeing multiple views played out simultaneously. Okay, we got perspective, which leads us out into the garden. But we also got another kind of perspective happening when we look down onto these potatoes on top there. They're almost kind of flattened off. These things are all just overlaid almost seamlessly in a picture. And the thing is, Charles' work was never kind of really put on a larger stage, probably because he never really left Cardiff. He didn't engage with the London set, if you like, and they never really engaged with him. But he just kept persistent with his vision. So he was taking all these ideas on board and putting them in his artworks, but they weren't really getting out to a larger audience, if you like. But as well as his knowledge of the art world and those different ideas, you've got this beautiful, honest kind of sharing of a narrative and a place and a sense of time. And the beautiful details, like the milk bottle behind the door and things like this, they are of a certain kind of era, so they work on so many levels. And you can see in this little still life that he's embraced this quality of pointillism, building up the whole piece with a series of dots. But he's done it differently. He laid down flat areas of colour first, local colours, and then he's put these dots over the top for a certain kind of purpose. Now, why has he done that? He's done that to kind of lift those flat areas and to create this kind of jewel-like quality. So he's put complementary colours and secondary colours together over a ground colour to lift it. And that's the emphasis. The word is lifting every area as high as he possibly can so it resonates with us. And when you see these pictures in the flesh, that happens. They have a simultaneous stillness, a monumental quality, which you see from the kind of structure of the different objects being portrayed, but they have a lightness to them as well, which is kind of elevates, like your eye gets to vibrate with the beautiful colors. So even in this one, you can see how he's using multiple viewpoints, looking down at different angles, but everything, once you're into the picture, you can't escape from it. Composition enables us to stay and keep going round and round and round in the work. As in this one, another view from a Canton window in the snow. It's got elements of the stories. He's got those lovely specifics, the cat on the wall. He's got the washing out again. But there's these beautiful details, like a little postcard or something on the wall there, but it's also a portrait. He's got the beautiful still life being used, but also kind of with perspective changed and transformed in keeping with abstract painting and abstract thought, you know. If you think of the other contemporary artists of this time, I know Ben Nicholson and people like that, they were all about flat portrayal of objects to twist space and time, you know, and Charles is doing that. He's incorporating all those things in the picture almost kind of seamlessly. He's not saying, you know, that the picture's all about that element. He's saying it is just another aspect of it. So it's kind of humble in the ways he's kind of offering that. But for us, if we get the opportunity to look at these pictures, we can get more time. We can investigate these different levels to it. And this is a daring composition. We get the view through the window. Well, what has he put right in the center? You know, he put this crossbar right there, and it kind of breaks up the view, but it mainly is put in for an abstract purpose because it takes us straight down through the picture, so then we can then wander around the rest of it. It holds the picture together. Every bit holds the picture. You know, you just keep moving and moving and moving. But he's cleverly reduced the scale as we go further back. So we do get this illusion of space as well. So we get this kind of push-pull feeling happening consistently. Very clever. And this one of Cardiff Market, painted in 1956. Obviously, those of us who were around at this time, well, maybe not me, but maybe one or two of us here tonight might remember this. You know, he's kind of captured a certain spirit and atmosphere in the place. All right, Cardiff Market has stayed pretty much the same for many years. It's a kind of oasis in the centre of Cardiff. But it kind of evokes this kind of feeling there that he's managed to portray. He's got a sense of, you know, interplay between the figures as well, which you kind of start to look at them and ask yourself, what are they thinking? What kind of dialogues are they having? So that narrative aspect is there. And when you stand in the entrance to Cardiff Market, it's usually pretty dark. But then you're kind of looking in towards the doors there, which is this kind of promise of something better, something lighter, something richer, just, you know, beyond reach, if you like. It's there in the distance. This idea of optimism just a bit further, you know, just there through the doors. He's got that kind of quality again. But the use of colours, they're kind of almost like, particularly in the distance, they're kind of African or Moroccan, or there's, you know, the design quality is there that you might find in Marrakesh, you know, that kind of element, all being overlaid. So this is Cardiff. This is on one level a kind of dark Cardiff in terms of the atmosphere and the sense of place and time for some people, but there's also this optimism and this hope, and this exotic quality is there as well. So again, many layers to it. And he's managed to do that, you know, lift it all for the backyard in Canton. When we think of Canton and we think of the houses there, you don't really think of them as having this kind of uplifting, magical quality. But he gives us this window into this space. The colours in the original are even much, much richer, you know. They are like jewels. But he gives us an insight into the quality, what is going on in these people's lives. And there's been kind of parallels between Charles and L.S. Lowry. And, you know, obviously Lowry's much more famous than Charles. Lowry portrayed, okay, Salford area. Charles portrayed Cardiff and its environs. And it's interesting that that was the case. And I think, you know, comment the Carl that Charles makes later in this presentation gives us an insight into why that is the case. So for us to revisit this and see these works now, it's something that, living in this area, we should be really proud that they actually exist, you know, and hopefully they will start to get more of an opportunity to be seen. The structure's so well constructed, you know, it's just so strong. The layering is there again, the colors are beautiful. The insight into the, you know, what is going on at that particular time sets this mood, sets this atmosphere, and there's a real joy there. And it's there's a kind of joy which really evolves into Charles' work, and that's what gives it this big vision. This beautiful picture in Kitchener Gardens in the springtime are just amazing. The blossom is coming through, but it's such a humble subject. It's not a grandiose landscape. It's not a massive seascape. It's not a great big stately home, and it's not rolling hills. It's humble. It's in the Canton High Street, but it's focusing on rebirth. It's focusing on optimism. It's focusing on nature. Things got the potential to get better. Things have got potential to reinvent themselves and become joyful, even though there might be restrictions at the moment, like the fences which are running through there. There's the cherry blossom in the trees. We can still just sit and be in amongst a busy urban environment and appreciate the beauty of the trees, the beauty of nature. As he's done in this one, this is the allotments in in Llandaff Gardens. Now, any of you that are from Cardiff or know that area, been back there, have been around here for a while, know Llandaff Fields, and know this area where you got this open air swimming pool, which had so many happy memories, and particularly for myself as well. Although it was freezing cold nearly all the time, but these open air pools were, but it was really lovely. But this shows, what happened, during the Second World War and after the Second World War, these fields were given over to the war effort to kind of grow food, and the utilitarian quality. And that's something that we've always had in South Wales. It's been, it's an industrial area, but it's an industrial area, of course, in a beautiful natural environment with the sea, of course, and the mountains and the greenery. And they've kind of had to coalesce together, sometimes successfully, sometimes not successfully. And Charles portrays these two aspects of it. Portrays how nature is there, how nature gets transformed, how the urban environment takes over elements of nature, but he still tries to offer a kind of beauty and a dual nature element of the landscape there. Hence all these beautiful little marks that are being shown and portrayed. But lovely memento of time and space and a passing era. As in this one at Butte Park, just appreciating the moment of just sitting in the park, spending time together, in this case with the family, or just reading a book, or sitting on your own in the nature, in the beauty of nature there. It's a kind of universal reminder of what is important, And don't forget, this Butte Park is in the centre of the city, so it's an oasis that is there as well. So again, it's something that we can appreciate. And you can see elements here in terms of artistry and, context. Pointillism is being used. These multicolored dots are being placed. There's Fauvist elements that we studied, these flat areas of color which draw you into certain parts. They're there as well. There's the abstract quality, shapes, composition, all there in this beautiful setting that maybe we just take for granted. And that's something which can easily be done. So it's nice to revisit this. Again, another humble picture. And it's that humility which comes out, I think, in his pictures, which is particularly appealing. This is the Gorsedd Gardens. We know this is in front of the National Museum. So Charles didn't do the view of the museum or the elaborate architecture or something. He just chooses a little side view where you could just sit quietly, relax, read your book, go to sleep, but appreciate the beauty of nature and have a hint of the architecture that is just surrounding and just beyond this area. It's that sensitive, and it is a sensitive perspective of just stepping to one side and seeing the beauty to the left and right of us when we slow down, which is being reflected in this work again. Also, connecting with this historical context of these sense of places. As in this one, with Sophia Gardens, so many activities go on and have gone on the Sapphire Gardens. They've had so many amazing concerts and shows, etc., over the years, which are hinted at there. But he's got the emphasis on the resting, the quiet, the away from the crowd. We're in the centre of the city again, but there's that time for reflection. Interesting for an artist to focus on that time for reflection there, so much so in his pictures, to tell that kind of story, because often we're looking for the impact of the scene, which is going to be powerful, but this is a gentle power in this. And to draw people sleeping as well, and the dogs and the animals, and reflecting, as well as a certain kind of busyness. Just it operates on so many levels, kind of evokes some real sensitive feeling inside. This is a brewery and paper mill in Ely, West Cardiff. The Ely mill and paper mill was a landmark for many years. This is obviously before the houses, and many of the houses started to follow all around it. Cardiff had so many canals which fed the city, and it must have been really beautiful in certain aspects. And in some way, wish we could have kept more of them there. We could have had a little mini Amsterdam. I've been a bit over the top there, I know, but there was potential for that, because these beautiful there's a lot of work to make those canals, and they could have been really focused on, because they run right through the centre of Cardiff as well, into Queen Street and all that kind of that Mill Lane, etc. So they would have been a real asset. Maybe they will be opened, I don't know. But Charles it takes us to that. He's kind of showing us the substructure that is there below Cardiff as well. It's just so many levels to it. The structure of the painting is there. We move around it. Composition is there. Abstract colours, beautifully inlaid. The reds, the yellows, as pure colour in figurative, muted colours. Combination of the muted greys, which set the scene, and the grey blues, and then drawn into these strong reds and strong yellows, the primary colours that could be straight out of Mondrian. These primary colours, the yellow and the blue. So he's right up on contemporary thought. He's reading these books, he's analysing it, he's seeing it, but obviously the art world wasn't getting it. Hasn't quite got it yet, unfortunately, but no doubt it will. And then this became a whole body of work that he produced of Cardiff docks. He was painting Cardiff docks in the 60s, end of 50s, 60s, when, of course, it was kind of starting to go past its heyday then. But he basically said he went to Cardiff docks because he couldn't afford to go anywhere else, and he would just borrow his friend's bike, go down there, drive down there, and then leave it down there so his friend could pick it up and come back the other way. But he was fascinated by elements of the dock, elements of the industry, and the boats and the international community that was brought into it. So he's recording what has now become a bygone age, but he was connecting with intriguing communities as well. And I suppose Charles spent a number of years of his youth in Barry, so he had the Barry docks experience with all those people that came to that area. He had an understanding of the people that came and why they came and the work they did. He also trained in engineering as well as developing his art, so all these passions kind of come together in why he chooses what he does, and makes these beautiful statements, these visual statements for us to reflect on. Because he's kind of turned them into, he's turned industry, in this case, into a form of visual poetry with the, as I said, the beautiful pointillist technique and the beautiful pinks and purples and subtle greens that you wouldn't expect with heavy industry, like the tanks and the belching out chimneys there. So he's blended all these different qualities, which gives us more and more richness to discover and rediscover in the artwork. And they look nice in the reproduction, but it's even so much better when you get a chance to go and see them. For that to happen, I think he donated a lot of pictures to Cardiff City Council, if I remember, and They did have them up in the west in their dock offices in is it West Canal Wharf? Correct me if I'm wrong, but they're there. But they should be open to the public. But I think you've got to go and ask to go and see it. But there was also a collection of his work in Cardiff Library for a while until they shut it and then rebuilt it and moved it, etc. For more of his works to be on public collection, that and a way of the public seeing it, it would be a real benefit. And here you got West Dock in Cardiff, and capturing the place and the space, taking us to this time, when the whole area was absolutely, still buzzing and alive with certain energy. And there's a kind of almost like childlike, playful quality in the work here as well, which is kind of coming out of the abstract nature of the way he paints. And he develops this abstract, playful element, lifting the spirits from that perspective, come out in what he develops in his sculptures later, which kind of got the name of magical mystery machines, magical machines. And he's kind of got them in this. If you look at this, and then when we look at some of his later sculptures, you'll see how they kind of blend together and how one aspect inspired the other. There's landmark buildings here. There's the Pier Head building. We got the top of the Norwegian church there. This was before it got moved over to, where the Cardiff Bay area is now, the main centre. This is where it was before, obviously. It takes us back to those old periods, the old tin shack, combined next to, the Pier Head building, beautiful architecture mixed with simple architecture. As in this one of the docks, beautiful portrayal of the reflections and the colours just running through this amazing technique. Quite a textured canvas, as you can see there. So he's let the canvas speak for itself up the top. But as he moves further down and the paint marks become thicker and the oil, content gets deeper, so it becomes a bit more impasto, then you start to just get this dabbing of all the marks. But each mark has got a size, a direction, and a scale. And that's what's important to remember this if you're interested in this technique. You're going to see, if you look at the way the marks have been put on the water, the emphasis is on horizontal. You see the marks here are bigger in size than they are in the distance there and there. So that aids perspective, okay? You see the marks here, which are on the side of the dock and the greenery, they're pushed up slightly vertically in the direction of grasses that would kind of grow. So the direction is changed. And you can see in the background there, those marks are put on diagonally. Coming out of the smoke and moving across there, it suggests movement. So it's extended movement going across the top. So the marks and the way they're put on and the size of the mark is important in this technique over the top of a very strong composition. That's how it's kind of put together for us. In this abstract piece, the composition is just there, strongly put together, and you can just see the marks coming through and gently sharing their beauty. A flattening of the subject here as well. So we've got some illusion, we got some sense of space, but we've also got the abstract quality being used strongly here. Beautiful rhythm in the verticals as well, leading us down to every part of the picture, and this path running through onto something just beyond. That thing about going just beyond again leads our eye up and through. Lovely colours in this one. Two bridges, Cardiff docks. References obviously to the industrial architecture of the time. Someone fishing in the dock, which obviously goes on. There's a human quality there. They're fishing there. They're sailing in there. So, as I said, these were the docks were in the 60s, and so the heyday had gone, and people are kind of reusing them. They're changing their kind of use, but they're still interacting with them in a slightly different way. But we get to see that kind of transition. Obviously, it'd be very difficult to notice and see these kinds of see some of these places now because they've been completely transformed by new buildings and flats and that kind of thing. But it's still possible to have a tour around these places and see where the different spots that he did paint, but how he manipulated perspective and composition is there's a reference there for actual place, but he's changed it. It's changed out of all recognition at times as well. Wow. And then Charles moves into a period in the 60s, end of the 60s, where he makes a whole series of abstract works. Now, you can see in his more figurative work, there's abstract qualities in aspects of it, but he then goes purely into abstract. And I suppose this is a kind of spirit of the time. Figuration in art that particular time was really frowned upon. No artists of their sort would be working in figuration. They had to be developing ideas and thoughts, and they had to be conceptual artists, or they had to be abstract artists. This is post-American art, the Jackson Pollocks and that kind of artists of those era. So Charles is engaging with that time and that place as well as following his own kind of vision. So you get these unusual shapes and these objects being placed side by side, and these little playful indications of something beyond time and space, and unusual creatures and manipulations of figures and that kind of thing. The imagination starts to really take off for him here. You can see this is like one foot in both camps. There's reference here to pure abstraction, which is just shape and form. We get a sense of place. There's an industrial quality to this. Like this looks like a rusty shape. It looks like it could be down the docks. The rooftops could be like the docks, but also it's broken into just pure abstraction, circles, rectangles, and squares. As I said, references to people like Mondrian or Cubism and all that kind of thing are taken on board. So it's almost like transition between one to the other. And then he starts to make these pictures. So these three-dimensional sculptures now, but they're a crossover between sculpture and painting. This is obviously a detail of one of these amazing machines that he made and for a while displayed in the old library in Cardiff. Pity about the picture quality here, but this was an exhibition in Art Central in Barry that actually was pretty good. And I remember going and having a chat with Charles at this. That is Charles actually there. And he was so pleased that these machines were actually being shown again as a kind of group. And it was a friend of Charles called Ken Williams worked so hard to enable that to happen. You can see, not very clearly, these are some of his paintings on the walls on the outside. But just put this in because it gives you some idea of the scale and the intricacy and the mechanics which are going on in these. All these parts would swing around and they would swirl and they would transform and they would change. They would make sounds, you can see in this one. This is a detail of it as well. All these kind of found objects were coming together to make these artworks. So he's gone almost from his paintings, and you can see the colours which appear in his paintings also appearing in his sculptures, to create this kind, via his abstraction, to create these living, moving artworks, which are known collectively as kinetic art. Now, when he had his body of kinetic art at the end of the 80s that he produced, that was being shown in Cardiff Library, that effectively was the largest collection of kinetic art in the UK, maybe even in Europe. But it wasn't really celebrated, But that's what we had on our doorstep at the time with these. And these pieces now, we haven't really found a really genuine home for them. They're dispersed around Wales, bits and pieces, in different, piecemeal ways, but there's no collective home. And the reason they need a collective home is because they're internationally unique. I've never seen anything else like it, from a global perspective. All right, kinetic art came about in the 1920s. And you got people like Nam Garbo and the American artist Calder making these mobiles. So they push on, kinetic art. But Charles has taken that much further and given it so many layers, so many other twists. He's given it a unique South Wales industrial twist, as opposed, because he's made and incorporated things which kind of, he's incorporated radios, he's incorporated things which move, he's incorporated things which kind of sing out, rattle. He's kind of used the mechanic element in his art, but he's also given it this uplifting, childlike quality, although they're definitely not toys. And he's kind of blended the arts of the 19th and earliest 20th century in them. So all these elements have kind of come together. So that's what's unique about them. They operate on so many interlaying threads of the art world. And the fact that they've emerged out of South Wales is quite extraordinary. And that's just, obviously fair play to Charles himself. You can see some here, there's one like this little moving robot and this machine that moves around and things which spin around. Transistor radios inside the piece as well, which sing out and tell stories and speak music and things like that, all overlaid in the same artwork. Now, this is a picture that I did of Charles in his bedsit when I think he was about 98 or something like that. Put it in because it gives you an insight into the man into later life. He was so humble. There was a real humility in his kind of being, his aura, if you like. He was one of the most kind of, I suppose, for want of a better word, spiritual person you could meet. He kind of just followed his path, obviously, for so long. Not many of us are going to get the opportunity to follow our course for 102 years and keep doing it, And he had this kind of vision. But when I was talking to him there, even there, you can the humility comes out by the way he's lit that room. It's just in a saucepan with a light with nothing on it. But all his sculptures, the latest ones he were doing, were all stacked up here, all around the outside, and they're filling the whole of the room. And he was concerned that he was in this bedsit where the landlord was putting pressure on him to say that you're not allowed to create art in it. You just had to live in it. You couldn't use it as a studio. And he was concerned about that. So I said to him, Charles, look, you're 98, you've done it all your life, just do it anyway. Not that he wasn't, he was going to do it. So then we get an opportunity to make this portrait together. And I was lucky enough to make a couple of portraits of him. But in this one, it was a beautiful experience because he kind of, you just coalesce with the person. And he was very generous in his way he kind of sat and engaging as well. He didn't move an inch when I was making his portrait. And he was very keen to see it. He said he'd had his portrait made by some London portrait painter the year before. And when she made his portrait, she wouldn't show him. And he kind of took umbrage to that. He thought, what are you trying to hide, until she'd gone away and then shown it later. But he wanted to be part of the creative process. So the fact that we were doing this together, we created it together, that meant something for him. And that kind of enabled the little sketch that I did to get some of the kind of character of the man. And with this little drawing and that black and white photograph, this is what he said that he wanted to be shared. So I thought, to end this little presentation, sorry I've gone on a little bit, but these are his kinds of words, which I think are useful for, all of us trying to be creative through all kinds of times. He said, I would say, do your own thing in life. If you have an idea, just do it. Don't be put off by other people. When I was young, I asked others what they thought of my work. If they didn't like it, I could be discouraged. As time passed, I continued with my own vision and became more confident. It's all right for all of us, isn't it? It is worthwhile to study and learn from the old and modern masters, but then go your own way. Do not be afraid to take risks. And as he said, while at Romley Primary School, I was lucky to have the headmaster, Mr. Peach, who encouraged the students in many different ways. He said, I remember being taken to trips to Stratford for Shakespeare. We were encouraged to play sports, including football and swimming. We were introduced to practical subjects, metalwork, and at the same time, I was part of a famous choir and orchestra, well known throughout the UK. He created an environment of classical music, sport, and practical application. The experience of that big vision never left me. And it's that big vision that we're after when we look at all these different presentations. Some will wash over us and others will just chime with, and that will give us that little door or that little window to develop our work. Sometimes when making a painting, a particular part can shine out. Now, for the sake of unity in the piece, it can be tempted to tone it down. But he says, I prefer to lift up all the other parts of the painting to support the part that shines out. Now, that's the important line there. Get the best bit of your picture that works and try and get all the other bits to up to that level, you know. That's the big challenge, but keep at it and we'll get there. Living the life of an artist and creating artwork can be isolating. Making a piece can include countless hours on your own. It's important to keep thinking big, enjoy what you do, and keep a clear vision. And this is another interesting line. To be an artist in Wales, you need to be made of steel.
If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell notification.